vast white expanse.
From the air, Antarctica is even more breathtaking. The scale of its mountains and vast ice sheets difficult to comprehend.
This beautiful plain has dropped us close to the South Pole, and we're going to camp here on the plateau, on the polar plateau, for a couple of days. It's an absolutely fantastic feeling to finally have arrived here at last, even though I know that it's going to be bitterly cold over the coming days. But here I am at last on the polar plateau, on the White Continent.
The first stage of Scott and Crean's journey was some 400 miles on the Ross Ice Shelf. Then a climb of 10,000 feet in altitude up the Beardmore Glacier, over 100 miles long. And then the polar plateau. Millions of square miles of flat, almost featureless ice. And at its heart, the South Pole. Crean and the rest of the team were now man-hauling all of their food and equipment. The sleds were heavy and wooden, the runners often clogged with ice, making them impossible to pull. They averaged barely 9 miles a day, stretched to the limits of human endurance and beyond.
They were man-hauling over enormous distances, maybe 15 or 1600 nautical miles. That's incredible. First of all, on the sea ice itself, and then up the glacier, and then onto the plateau. I mean, it is just beyond comprehension of what these guys were doing 100 years ago.
Okay, good.
The weather can change rapidly down here. With the wind rising, Ronnie decides to get the tents up and some warm food inside us.
Good, and that last one. That's a fast way to put up a tent. Cool. The hunt are frozen now. I'll go into the tent.
My feet got very cold at one point, a small blister there. And here, pulling the pulk just from the boots. So Ronnie has suggested that I tape it up where it was. Man-hauling the sleds took an enormous toll on Scott and his men. One of their biggest problems was their diet. Experts have calculated that Scott's men needed 6,000 to 8,000 calories every day just to keep going. Records from the expedition showed the men were barely getting half of what they needed. As time went on, the men were simply wasting away. It took them 3 weeks to climb the 100 miles of the Beardmore Glacier. Every mile a hard-won battle against deep snow, crevasses, and a new enemy, altitude. But Crean didn't seem to suffer from very much at all, and by general accounts was in good shape and high spirits as the team closed in on the prize.
This is an incredible vista. The horizon just stretches so far away. Wherever you look in any direction, you can go for maybe 1,000 kilometers or more on this plateau. And there's not a cloud in the sky. I've taken my wind mask down, as it were, to do this little clip of an interview. I can already feel the cold biting into my nose. If there was a wind with this now, it would just be unbearable. There is no experience like it. And that's what Antarctica is about.
By the 20th of December 1911, the expedition was entering the heart of the polar plateau. Scott had whittled his party down to just 8 men, and Crean was still there and looking strong. 2 weeks later, they were 150 miles from the South Pole, when Scott announced that he and 4 others would make the final push. Crean was not one of them.
And there's an account of what exactly happened. Apparently, Scott was passing by Crean's tent and he heard him cough. He said, Crean, you've got a nasty cough. You must be careful with a cold like that, Crean. Crean replied straightforwardly, you think I can't take a hint, sir?
Crean was deeply disappointed and didn't hide his feelings. Crean, Teddy Evans and Bill Lashley watched as Scott and the final 4 disappeared into the white distance. They were the last to see them alive. Crean and his 2 companions turned for home. Ahead was a grueling return journey of nearly 700 miles, every mile to be travelled on foot.
I'm just totally flattened. Honest to God. I've not a bit of energy left. I don't know how anybody can do it. I'm genuinely exhausted, flattened. And to be honest, I'm not certain on how much further I can go on today. Pulling this sled is like pulling, I don't know, something in the heaviest of sand. It's totally just, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's like, it doesn't look like that, but it's so hard. Everything I do is taking me 10 times what I normally would do. I'm just functioning on less than half what I would say, half my speed, half my energy. I could go for another maybe 20 minutes or half an hour at the most. But I need to get into my sleeping bag. I need to bundle up.
Okay, can you feel all your fingers?
Yeah, I can.
You can? Okay. And your body temperature?
I'm cold. I'm reflective.
Okay.
Crane, Evans and Lashley's return journey soon turned into a race against time. Teddy Evans was seriously ill. For over a month, he struggled to keep up. When he could no longer walk, Crane and Lashley strapped him to their sledge and pulled him along. But soon Evans was on the verge of death. They were 35 miles from base, 4 days' travel under normal conditions. They decided Lashley would stay with Evans, and after walking 1,600 miles across Antarctica, Tome Crane would make a final dash for home. Evans and Lashley watched Crane disappear over the horizon. Mile after mile, Crane fought his way across the ice. He had no compass for navigation, no tent or sleeping bag for shelter. And the lives of his two companions depended on his last reserves of strength. For 35 miles, Crane walked non-stop, and with a storm brewing, just made it back to the hut. Evans and Lashley were saved, and Crane had pulled off a miracle. It was 3:30 in the afternoon on the 19th of February, just over 19 hours after he left on this incredible solo journey. It says he stumbled into Hut Point, fell to his knees almost delirious with hunger and exhaustion and numbed with cold, and blurted out the news about his two companions. And there's a description of Atkinson giving him food, and Crane recalled, "He gave me a tot first and then a feed of porridge, but I couldn't keep it down." Taken shortly after his extraordinary march, this photograph clearly shows the strain on Crane's face. And even a few weeks later, he hadn't fully recovered. Crane's life-saving march cemented his reputation as one of the most resilient men to have ever explored these regions.
Just an absolutely splitting headache. It must be the altitude, what I call the altitude sickness kicking in for me, because I just feel absolutely rotten this morning. I've also got a bit of a head cold, which was coming on for the last few days. And I just generally feel miserable. Yesterday afternoon, I was absolutely frozen. My toes were frozen, so I put foot warmers into them. Other than that, my toes will be frostbitten. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So I think we'll have breakfast and see.
My few short days in the polar plateau have given me some small sense of the truly remarkable endurance of these early travellers, so remote from help and home. All I can do is pay my respects and complete a token journey in their honour and tell their story. Is the bottom of the earth, the goal that Shackleton, Scott, Amundsen and Tome Crane strive so hard to reach. The Americans have built a research station right on the pole, a complex of buildings, tracks and telescopes. But that's not why I'm here. This is the place that Crane never saw, turned back just 150 miles away. I'm privileged to be here in his memory.
The South Pole, finally, after all the years, after all the talk, the sphere. Look at it.
So this is it, Ronnie. This past that pole. Look at it. Yeah, we made it all the way from Punta Arenas to Union Glacier and here. We first started in Kerry last year in August. Tome Crane, he should have made it here. He was one of the most courageous, hard, enduring, incredible Irishmen that ever existed, that ever lived. And Tome Crane, if any man ever deserved to get to the South Pole, it was Tome Crane, for all the things he did on those 3 great expeditions. But this is what I want, to come to the South Pole to honour Tome Crane and to complete the journey for him. So that's it, it's simple.
Crane always carried a scapular on his polar journeys to keep him safe from harm. I've kept a promise. A dream I've had for over 20 years has finally been realized.
Well, this is the actual marker that they place every year because the ice is moving here. And this is the spot on the, it says it on the 1st of January 2011. That's exactly the spot. This was the very bottom of the earth.
On the 17th of January 1912, Scott and his 4 companions reached this very place, and they found a tent left by Roald Amundsen a month before. They had lost the race. Scott wrote in his diary, "This is an awful place, and terrible enough for us to have laboured to it, without the reward of priority." They paused long enough to take this photograph. It shows the toll the journey had taken on them. their faces frostbitten and beaten. There is no hope there. The 5 men turned and began the long struggle to base camp, over 800 miles away. But it soon became a death march, and a little over 2 months later, all of them had perished. Eight months later, a search party found the bodies of Scott, Wilson and Bowers, just 11 miles from a food store. Tome Crane was part of that team. Scott's loyal companion for over a decade, Crane helped collapse the tent and build a simple cairn over the bodies. It's one of the great what-ifs of polar exploration. What if Scott had taken Tome Crane to the pole? Is it too much to imagine the indestructible Kerryman somehow saving Scott and his stricken comrades? Next week I'm back on the trail of Tome Crane. In 1914, with fellow Irishman Ernest Shackleton, Crane took part in one of the most incredible polar adventures ever. I follow his story from Antarctica through the southern oceans and finally to South Georgia, one of the remotest islands on Earth.
Next year on One, we join Pat Kenny for The Frontline, and for part 2 of Charlie Bird on the trail of Tome Crane, join us next Monday at the same time of 9:35. But there's more on that in just a moment.